Aisha was only 24, but she had already learned what sacrifice really meant. Every morning before sunrise, she slipped into her white nurse uniform and caught the early bus through the streets of Port Elizabeth. She worked double shifts at the small community hospital, treating patients all day, taking notes at night, and sometimes sleeping just 3 hours before doing it all again. Every rand she earned, she saved carefully in a small account. Her dream was simple but powerful: to open her own medical clinic in her neighborhood, a place where people who couldn't afford healthcare could still be treated with dignity. But at home she had no peace. Her mother, Zanelle, was the kind of woman who cared more about how things looked than how things were. She spent her time gossiping with neighbors, buying flashy clothes on credit, and talking about how respectable families should live. When Aisha mentioned her dream one evening over dinner, Zanelle scoffed. "A clinic? You?" she said, raising her eyebrows. "You should be grateful I raised you. Don't dream beyond your level, my girl." Aisha swallowed her hurt and stayed quiet. She knew arguing would only lead to shouting. Instead, she washed the dishes, went to her room, and opened her old notebook filled with sketches of clinic layouts and handwritten goals. "Someday," she whispered to herself. Every night, she wrote down how much she saved: 50 rands here, 100 there. She skipped new clothes, turned down parties, and packed her lunch to work. Her friends called her boring. Her mother called her ungrateful. But Aisha called it focus. Sometimes she stood outside the hospital and imagined her name on a small signboard: Aisha Health Clinic, hope for all. It wasn't much yet, but it kept her going. Deep down, she believed that one day, all the long nights and all the tears would mean something. What she didn't know was that her biggest test, and deepest heartbreak, was just around the corner. That morning started like any other. Aisha had just come off a long night shift and wanted to transfer a little money to her savings, the one she had built for years with every drop of sweat. She unlocked her phone, logged into her banking app, and froze. Her balance read R0.00. For a moment, she thought it was a glitch. She refreshed the app. Again, still the same. Every cent of her R280,000 gone. Her heart started pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. "No, no, no," she whispered, her hands shaking. She tried to think. Maybe the bank made a mistake. Maybe she was hacked. Then she saw the name on the transfer: Zanelle M. Her own mother. Aisha's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor. She dialed her mother's number again and again, but it kept going to voicemail. She left messages, sent texts, begged for an answer. Nothing. The silence from the other end was worse than any scream. Hours later, as the sun began to set, her cousin sent her a message on Instagram with a single photo. There was Zanelle, her mother, in Mauritius. Smiling wide, wearing sunglasses, a glass of champagne in her hand, the ocean glittering behind her. The caption read, "Finally rewarding myself. I deserve this life." Aisha's phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a thud. For a second she couldn't breathe. The woman who gave her life had just stolen her future, her dream, without a hint of guilt. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at the photo again and again, trying to make sense of it. She had imagined betrayal before, but never from her own blood. The same woman who once scolded her for dreaming too big had now used her hard-earned savings to live that dream for herself. Aisha sat there, trembling, feeling the kind of heartbreak no man could ever cause, the heartbreak only a mother can give. That night she didn't sleep. She just stared at the ceiling, whispering to herself, "Why, Mama? Why would you do this to me?" But no answer came, only the sound of her own broken heart echoing in the dark. Aisha called her mother the next morning with tears still burning in her eyes. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the phone. When Zanelle finally picked up, her voice sounded cheerful, like nothing had happened. "Mom, where's my money?" Aisha asked, her voice breaking. "The R280,000 I saved, it's gone. I saw your name on the transfer." There was a pause, then a light laugh. "Oh, calm down," Zanelle said, as if Aisha was being dramatic. "You live under my roof. You owe me everything you have. I just took what's mine." Aisha's throat went dry. "What's yours?" "Mom, that was my clinic fund. I worked years for that money. Every night shift, every patient, every sacrifice. Oh, please, Zanel interrupted sharply. Don't make it sound like I haven't sacrificed too. Who paid for your food, your clothes, your life? You should be thanking me. I'll pay you back when I can. Then just like that she hung up. Aisha sat there staring at her phone, numb. It felt like someone had reached inside her chest and ripped something out. This wasn't just about money, it was about love, trust, and respect. All gone in one call. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to cry until her body gave out. But all she could do was sit in silence, realizing a truth she never wanted to face. Her own mother didn't see her as a daughter anymore. Just a wallet that finally ran dry. In that moment, something inside Aisha shifted. The girl who once worked for her mother's approval was gone. All that was left was a woman who had nothing left to lose. And everything left to prove. Aisha didn't leave her room for 2 days. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her heart felt like it had been stepped on. Everything she had worked for, gone. Every dream she had, stolen. She couldn't even bring herself to eat. Then on the 3rd day, her best friend Naledi showed up at her door with takeout and that familiar tough love attitude. Get up, Naledi said, setting the food down. You look like life ran you over. Aisha gave a weak smile. Maybe it did. She told Naledi everything. The stolen savings, the call, the laughter, the betrayal. Naledi listened quietly, her face hardening with every word. When Aisha finished, Naledi leaned forward and said softly, "Then we start again. You're not finished yet." Aisha frowned. "How can I start again, Naledi? That was all I had." Naledi smiled, that spark in her eyes lighting up. "No, you still have something, your brain, your heart, your purpose. You wanted to bring healthcare to your people, right? Then let's build something better. Something even your mother can't steal." Those words lit a small flame inside Aisha, shaky but real. That night, they sat on the floor of Naledi's small apartment, brainstorming ideas until sunrise. Naledi, who worked at a local tech startup, helped her sketch out a plan, a mobile health app that connects nurses with remote patients for home visits and online consultations. They called it CareLink Africa. The next few months were brutal. Aisha worked night shifts at the hospital and spent her days coding, planning, and testing the app with Naledi. She barely slept, lived on coffee and instant noodles, and used every bit of her nursing knowledge to design a system that truly helped people. Slowly, the app started gaining attention. Nurses signed up. Patients booked appointments. It was small at first, but it was real, and it was hers. Then one evening, while Aisha was at the hospital, her phone buzzed. It was a number from Cape Town. The man introduced himself as an angel investor who had read about CareLink on a small blog. "I believe in what you're doing," he said. "Let's make it bigger." A week later they met in person. He offered to invest our $5 million into the project. Aisha could barely speak. Tears filled her eyes as she signed the papers. Not because of the money, but because she realized something powerful. The same pain that broke her heart had built her destiny. What her mother took was only money. What she created was purpose. Within just a few months, CareLink Africa exploded beyond anything Aisha ever imagined. What started as 2 friends working from a tiny apartment turned into a national movement. Nurses across South Africa signed up to the app. Patients in small villages, people who used to travel hours just to see a doctor, were now getting care right at their doorsteps. News reporters started calling. Her picture appeared on TV and online articles with the headline, "Young Nurse Revolutionizes Rural Healthcare." For the first time, Aisha's name was being celebrated, not for where she came from, but for what she created. The hospital where she once worked even invited her back to give a talk about innovation in healthcare. When she stood at that podium, looking at all the faces staring back with pride and admiration, she felt something deep inside, peace. Meanwhile, far away in Mauritius and then Dubai, Zanel was living her fantasy. Designer bags, hotel brunches, champagne photos, all for the likes and the comments. But slowly, things began to crumble. The money she stole was long gone. Her credit cards started getting declined. The friends she partied with stopped answering her calls. Her perfect life began falling apart piece by piece. One evening, furious and desperate, Zanel dialed Aisha's number. "Did you move my money?" she shouted the moment Aisha answered. "I can't access my accounts." "You think you're clever now, huh? You can't just forget your mother." Aisha sat in her new office. Glass walls, sunlight streaming in, her company's logo shining behind her. She looked calm, composed, and stronger than ever. Her voice was steady when she replied, "No, Mom. I didn't move your money." She paused for a moment, then added softly, "I just moved on." Zanel went silent. For the first time, she had no words, just the sound of her own downfall echoing through the line. Aisha ended the call and leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath. She wasn't angry anymore. She didn't need revenge. Success had already spoken for her. The girl her mother once mocked for dreaming too high was now standing exactly where she was meant to be, on top of everything they said she couldn't have. When the money finally ran out and the party life ended, Zanel had no choice but to return home. She arrived in Port Elizabeth dragging her designer suitcase, expecting everyone to feel sorry for her, especially Aisha. She imagined her daughter would welcome her back, maybe even offer her some of her new success money. But life had other plans. When she reached her house, the front gate was wide open. Two men were there, removing furniture and packing boxes into a truck. "Excuse me. What are you doing?" she yelled. One of them looked at her calmly and said, "Repossessing. The bank sent us. Unpaid loans, ma'am." Zanel froze. "What loans?" she demanded, until she saw the paperwork. Her own name and Aisha's, forged together. She had forgotten about the credit cards and fake signatures she had used years ago, thinking she'd pay them off someday. Now it had all caught up to her. Panicking, she dropped her bags and rushed to Aisha's company headquarters, a tall glass building in the city center with a bold sign that read CareLink Africa. She thought she could just walk in, cry, and her daughter would fix everything. But as soon as she tried to enter, two security guards stopped her. "I need to see my daughter," she said, out of breath. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" one of them asked politely. "She's Aisha. My daughter. She'll want to see me." Zanel snapped. The guards exchanged looks, unsure what to say. Then, through the glass doors, she saw a crowd forming inside. Music played. Cameras flashed. Aisha was standing on a brightly lit stage, holding a golden plaque that read, "National Innovation Award, Healthcare Pioneer of the Year." Reporters surrounded her, microphones out. People clapped and cheered. Aisha smiled, confident and graceful, her voice calm as she thanked her team and spoke about helping communities across Africa. Zanel stood outside the glass, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time, she truly saw her daughter, not as the quiet girl she used to dismiss, but as a woman the whole nation now admired. She pressed her hand against the glass and whispered, almost to herself, "That's my daughter." One of the guards, standing beside her, said softly but firmly, "Ma'am, please stand behind the line." Zanel stepped back, heartbroken. The applause inside grew louder, echoing through the hall. She realized she was now just another face in the crowd, watching the same daughter she once looked down on rise higher than she could ever reach. That night, after the award ceremony, Aisha sat in her quiet apartment overlooking the city lights. She felt peace for the first time in years, until her phone started buzzing. When she saw the name flashing on the screen, her chest tightened. For a moment she thought about ignoring it, but something inside her, maybe habit, maybe hope, made her answer. The voice on the other end was shaking. "Aisha, baby, it's me. Please don't hang up." Aisha stayed silent. Zanel began to sob. "I'm sorry, my child. Messed up. They're taking everything, the house, the car. I have nowhere to go. Please, I need help." Aisha took a deep breath, closing her eyes. She could almost hear her younger self crying on the other end of the line, the girl who once begged her mother for answers, for love, for kindness. "Do you remember when I needed help, Mom?" she asked softly. "When you took everything from me and went on vacation while I cried in that small room? I was lost, baby." Zanel cried. "I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to live a good life. Please forgive me, Aisha. Please." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was Zanel's heavy breathing and quiet sobs. Aisha's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. She finally whispered, "I forgive you, Mom, but I can't save you." After the call ended, Aisha opened her banking app and transferred our 10,000, just enough for a bus ticket, a few meals, and a roof for a few nights. Nothing more. No long messages. No second chances. No speeches about karma or pain. Just quiet, a deep, final silence that said everything her heart had held for years. Zanel called back several times that night, but Aisha didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence said it all. Not anger, not revenge, just peace. Because sometimes the loudest closure doesn't come from shouting back. It comes from finally walking away and letting the echo of your growth speak for itself. Months passed like wind through broken glass. Quiet but cutting. Zanel left Port Elizabeth, too ashamed to face her relatives or neighbors who now whispered about her downfall. She found a small cleaning job at a hotel in Durban, far from anyone who knew her name. Every morning she woke up before sunrise, tied her hair in a scarf, and scrubbed floors that once might have been beneath her heels. The same hands that used to flash gold rings now pushed mops and wiped tables for tourists. At first she told herself it was temporary, but weeks turned into months. Nobody called. Nobody cared. The woman who once lived for attention now had nothing but silence and regret. Every time she saw young women in business suits walk past the lobby, she wondered if they knew how lucky they were, or how fast pride can destroy a person. Meanwhile, miles away, Aisha's world was transforming in ways she'd only dreamed of. CareLink Africa was now in the headlines again, this time across borders. Kenya, Ghana, and even Nigeria had adopted her system for connecting nurses with remote patients. Government officials wanted to partner with her. International investors called weekly. Her office had grown into a full-blown company, with employees who admired her not just as a boss, but as a visionary. Reporters loved her story, the young nurse who turned betrayal into innovation. They invited her to speak at conferences and health forums. Cameras followed her, and microphones caught every word. But when interviewers asked about her past, about what pushed her to build CareLink, Aisha never mentioned names. She only smiled gently and said, "Some lessons cost more than money, but they buy your peace." That one line spread like wildfire across social media. It was quoted, posted, and printed on motivational posters. But only Aisha knew the weight behind it, the sleepless nights, the heartbreak, the betrayal that had once crushed her. And yet, she didn't hate her mother anymore. She didn't even think of revenge. Instead, she prayed quietly that Zanel would find peace too, the kind that doesn't come from money or attention, but from finally facing yourself. Back in Durban, as Zanel wiped down a table one afternoon, a TV in the hotel lobby played an interview of Aisha receiving an international award. Guests clap. Zanel stood still, staring at the screen. Her daughter's smile filled the room, confident, radiant, unstoppable. For the first time in years, Zanel smiled too, though her eyes were wet. "She made it," she whispered to herself. "She really made it." It was the kind of pain that hurt and healed all at once. A year later, Aisha arrived in Durban for a big healthcare conference. She had been invited as a keynote speaker, the youngest health innovator in the region. The event was being held at one of the city's best hotels, filled with doctors, investors, and journalists waiting to hear her story. She looked graceful in her white suit, her confidence glowing brighter than ever. After her speech, she decided to take a quiet walk through the hotel restaurant. The place was busy, waiters serving guests, laughter echoing from tables, the smell of coffee and pastries in the air. And then she saw her, at the far end of the room, wearing a faded uniform and carrying a tray of glasses, was Zanel, her mother. For a moment time stopped. The woman who once mocked her dreams and stole her future now stood in front of her, smaller somehow, tired, worn, and humbled by life. Zanel turned, her eyes meeting Aisha's across the room. The tray in her hands shook, and one of the glasses fell, shattering on the floor. The sound made everyone look, but Aisha didn't move. She just stared, her heart caught between pain and pity. Slowly, Aisha walked over. Zanel's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling. "Aisha," she whispered, almost too afraid to say the name. Aisha knelt slightly to help pick up the broken glass, then stood tall, looking at her mother, not with anger but with peace. "It's okay," she said softly. "You don't have to say anything." Zanel couldn't stop crying. "I'm so sorry, my baby," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I wish I could take it all back." Aisha gave a small smile, not cold, not bitter, just calm. "Thank you, Mom," she said quietly, "for teaching me to never depend on anyone but God." And with that, she turned and walked away. No shouting, no drama, just silence and grace. Every step she took felt lighter, freer, as if years of pain were finally lifting off her shoulders. Behind her, Zanel stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter disappear through the crowd, successful, kind, unbroken. For the first time in her life, Aisha realized that forgiveness isn't always about letting someone back in. Sometimes it's about letting yourself move on. Months later, Aisha stood in front of a bright white building, her new health clinic. The sky was soft gray, and the air smelled like rain. Laughter filled the courtyard as children played, and nurses helped the crowd find seats. Banners fluttered in the wind, carrying the words, "CareLink Health, Hope Starts Here." Aisha took a deep breath before walking to the microphone. Her elegant white suit shone under the stage lights, but it was the calm in her eyes that drew everyone in. The crowd quieted. Cameras flashed. Her voice was steady, warm, and full of truth. "The money she stole built this place," she said, her smile gentle. "Because it built me." For a moment there was silence, deep and emotional. Then applause erupted, echoing through the courtyard. People stood, clapping not just for the clinic, but for the woman who turned pain into purpose. As the event ended, the first drops of rain began to fall. Aisha didn't run for cover. She stepped out into the open, letting the rain kiss her face. She looked up at the cloudy sky, her heart full and still. "What was taken from me," she whispered softly, "was never lost. It was transformed." The raindrops sparkled like tears of peace. Behind her, the clinic lights glowed, a symbol of healing, forgiveness, and strength. Aisha didn't need revenge. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Her peace spoke louder than revenge ever could. And as the rain fell harder, it washed away the last traces of her pain, leaving only grace behind.